Okay, hello everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining the Deer Talk Now podcast once again. I am Dan Schmidt. I want to introduce this guest by making him blush like I do with most people. When you think of Michigan, you think of great communicators. You had Fred Bear, you had Richard Smith, you had Mike Avery, John Eberhardt, so many different people. And Dale Techel is with us today. If you don't recognize his name, you probably have already visited his page, the Michigan Deer Hunters page on Facebook. Dale, welcome to the program. It's great to have you on here.
Thank you very much. And you just named a lot of greats in Michigan also, and just a lot of great hunting heritage in the state of Michigan. Glad to be here today with you.
Thanks. And what we're going to talk about Michigan, obviously, but what I want to talk about you, because you and I have conversed back and forth on the internet for years now, and you're a deer camp guy. I grew up as a deer camp guy with that heritage. And I want to just go back and put you on the spot and tell me, what is one of your favorite memories of deer camp?
I think for me, I'm the youngest of three brothers. My father, big hunter, and I think for me, my biggest memory would have to be just the times with my father and his friends. A lot of deer camps nowadays seem to be getting smaller and smaller. Even my own deer camp with my family is getting smaller. So I think for me, the best memories, and it wouldn't even just be one, it would just be how we interacted with our whole group of guys. My dad had two best friends. My dad had passed away a couple years ago, and yet my two friends, or his best two friends, Al Dopp and Bill Esch. Bill's going to be 91 coming up on the 20th of this month. Happy birthday to him. And Al is, I believe he's going to be 88. Both are having a few health issues, but I was able to hunt with actually Al last weekend, or 2 weekends ago, excuse me. So health is getting down, but we're able to still get him out to his deer blind, get him a chance to get out and see some deer, and he ended up missing a deer this weekend or last weekend, so I was kind of bummed about that, but it's great that he's still out there. So I think for me, my best memories have really been with this group of men. We started out really as pheasant hunters. My dad was a big pheasant hunter, and 20th of October was pretty much back in those days as big as November 15th of Michigan opening day deer season was. It's been kind of forgotten now, being Michigan, as pheasants have kind of died off unless you want to go with some of the preserves, which is still fun to do. I still do that. But it's not the same where, you would get up in the morning on the 20th and it would be just like, it'd be bumper to bumper traffic. Kids would take off school and everything, go with their dads. And Michigan had a 10 o'clock opener, which was kind of strange. I always thought as a kid, but a lot of fun days. So we just progressed this whole group of guys through our whole hunting career, really. Back in those days, we didn't have things like this podcast. We didn't have, beyond magazines or VHS tapes, that's really where we learned things. That's why when stuff like you came out with magazines and a lot of helpful insights, and that stuff was really critical back then. It was really just learn as you go. But it was fun times. So those were, I could go through and probably name an hour or two's worth of just fun hunting trips, but our group always got together and we hunted. Whether it was turkey, my brother and my friends, or Bill's son got an elk tag once in Michigan, which was kind of a rarity. We had 2 years apart, we had elk tag. So our whole group, we all went up to the Vanderbilt, Atlanta, Michigan area, and they both got cow elks, which were pretty cool. So we were able to get out there. So for me, why my hunting page kind of took off, for me, I always had a camera in my hand. Back then, it was funny because my friend Al, he had bought a big VHS recorder, the ones you put up on your shoulders, and it wasn't fun walking through the woods. But me and him, we followed my brother around under elk hunting stuff, so we got some pretty cool video. But that was just fun days. So things have changed a lot, and that's why I think how my hunting page kind of got going. I just really enjoy that, and I wanted to share what's kind of been missing a lot in hunting.
I agree, and that's why I like your page so much. It's the real deal, whether you live in Michigan or Missouri or Alabama. I think there's so many people who grew up that way. I grew up that way. The pheasants by us, my dad would tell the stories, and we didn't get to experience it because by that time the pheasants were kind of already gone. This was by the 70s. And so we grew up rabbit hunting. And then it was the same way with deer camp was it was reserved for 9 days. That was it. I mean, nobody bow hunted back then. A couple people here and there. But for me, and I'm sure it was the same for you, you kind of mentioned it, there wasn't any other outlet. And for us, that's where you had your first sip of a beer. You actually heard an adult, when we say swear, it was probably like damn or something like that. And it was like, oh my gosh, I heard somebody.
Yeah, my dad never swore.
Yeah, my dad didn't either. And it was like they would play cards and tell stories. And as a teenage kid, that was your coming to like you kind of were brought into, I don't want to say became a man, but that's like where you really learned how, I mean, I know you're a Christian as well, but like you learned how the men had that restraint, but then there was that camaraderie, which is I think we kind of pine for it. I think we've lost it. A lot of people are just hunting by themselves now and doing that type of thing. But those types of memories, I hate to say that we're old, but those types of memories for us older guys are what really kept us into hunting, and I think what keeps us propelling. It's really great to hear about your dad's friends. Sorry to hear about your dad. I lost my dad last year. And those guys keep going, you know.
Yeah, so to interrupt you, I mean, like what I just started up again, I don't know if you've seen on my page recently, my dad and our whole group, what we would do, we would always have a pre-deer season party.
Yep.
We would get together in someone's basement or whatever, put the VHS tapes in, we'd watch and just talk what we're going to be doing for the upcoming season. And that was kind of how, I mean, it was just a lot of fun, laughter, some drinks and things like that. But it was kind of getting us in the mood, whether it was for turkey season or whatever. So I just recently, last 3 years ago, I started that back up because I was thinking, you know, those were so much fun times. And yet everybody I know now, or at least mass majority of hunters, as you just said, a lot of people hunt by themselves. And yet everybody knows hunters. You work with somebody, you have a next door neighbor or somebody at church or whatever. So I just thought, well, even though we're maybe not in a big like deer camp, why don't we get together like we did years ago, invite everybody over, just have a night in the backyard around the bonfire and just talk deer stories. And that's been steadily growing for me. And I've been recommending that to a lot of people because it's, I mean, as you just said, I mean, a lot of people don't get that atmosphere of deer camp and it's missed. And I think everybody I've invited so far, our group keeps getting bigger every year now, has really said, man, I really enjoyed that party. And it just gets you in that mood. And yet everybody, this year what I did a round table type talk. And what was nice, I mean, everybody hunted different too, and yet we all got along. I mean, there was guys that were big buck hunters, there were guys that were out for does this year, guys that had hunted in the previous years, hadn't recently, and yet we all just got along. And that's what was really cool about it. It goes to show that we as hunters can get along. It's just that we have to accept we're all different. I mean, everybody likes to hunt different, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I think that's been overlooked a lot, and I try to push it on my page a lot that, you know, everybody, I'm not going to, I accept people's opinions and things like that, but everybody does like to hunt different.
They all hunt different. What is, like, back by us, when we started, and you don't see this anymore, for gun season, Saturday and Sunday, you sat on a quote-unquote stand, but a lot of times that stand was just a stump, or you were standing up against a tree. And then starting Monday of our gun season, we did deer drives, like nonstop for the rest of the season. Was that kind of how it was where you grew up, or was it different than that?
Yeah, I mean, ours always just started whatever, it was always the 15th, whether it was a Monday or a Saturday or whatever. People still kind of argue about that, but I think there's a lot of tradition to that. I myself, personally, I like the 15th tradition. It's just old school guy type thing. And I figure if people want to hunt, they're going to go out and hunt. But at times I see the other people's opinions too with weekend hunting too. But yeah, that's what it was. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest changes I've seen, and probably you've seen too, where, I mean, it was pretty basic. And I was just joking with my buddy a while back. I said, you know, we had a lot colder winters back then too. So, I mean, you go out on November 15th. I mean, I'm a 14-year-old kid. Back then it was archery 12, I believe, and then 14 for for gun we could start in Michigan. It's changed now. But yeah, I mean, you would go out there and the technology of your clothing, your boots, everything wasn't there. So I mean, you would go out there in just a little bucket or a little full back chair or something. I mean, I kind of laugh now because I mean, when you look back to those years, like what you call like prime time. I mean, you want to be out in your deer stand 8:30, 9:30 in the morning. You were back of the truck because you were froze solid. So pop-up blinds, box blinds, heated jackets and all that stuff has really made a difference over the years for hunters. So it's nice, but on the other hand, there was a lot of fun involved with that too. You got you push more deer, guys are moving around more. Now guys kind of go out, especially on private lands, they kind of go out there and sit there a whole day. So I think that hurts a little bit as far as pushing deer on some areas that just don't have a lot of pressure.
Deer Talk Now is brought to you by Wildlife Research Center and the new Golden Rope Scent Rope Kit. The kit comes with 4 ounces of Golden Rope Scent Concentrate, 3 cable ties, and 3 scent ropes made of proprietary fibers meant to absorb the maximum amount of scent. Simply saturate the rope in your scent of choice, hang it from a branch, and watch the trail cam photos come flying in. For more information, go to wildlife.com. Let's talk about Michigan particularly. I've followed the state very closely for the past 30 years. It's just as far as pure numbers, and I know that every state does it differently. The trend for Michigan is a declining deer population and a declining harvest. What are your thoughts on that, and what do you think? How do you think the state is doing in managing it?
I actually was involved with this new deer management initiative that was started this spring. Came out last January. You could apply for that, and my name was drawn. A lot of the reason I picked my name was I had a lot of social presence as far as people, kind of a variety of people's opinions, and I do enjoy that. So I actually had that knowledge, and I think they wanted something like that. And what was kind of, even though it really didn't turn out, I think a lot of people wanted it to be. I mean, at least on that panel of people, there was a variety of people in there, from business owners to people. I mean, there was a Upper Peninsula and a Lower Peninsula group, and there was a variety of people. I mean, from logging industry. So I mean, at least everybody was kind of represented in there. So when it comes to like deer numbers, I know lately, I mean, I think that's probably by you too, but EHD has really hit hard in Michigan the last few months. I think recently, Michigan had said they had, I think, at least 2,000 confirmed, and wow. You can probably figure for everyone that's confirmed, there's probably 3 or 4 that probably haven't been, because they have a website or somewhere you can log in, you can submit if you find a deer like that by water or whatever. So I hate to think how many deer have been killed because of that, but I mean, it is what it is. So recently the biggest focus of those groups have been high deer numbers, and really the biggest issues Michigan's having, and it's kind of a broad spectrum the way Michigan is. Southern Michigan, yeah, definitely has an overabundance of deer, and biggest issues we really have with the southern part of Michigan is just really access to hunting. So we've been trying to come up with ways to how do we get hunters in areas that just aren't available. And I know I had recently did a podcast with Tom Nelson. He lives on the west side of the state, and that's what he had said too. He goes, Michigan's one of their biggest problems is just access to hunting. He said you can go to a lot of other states and you don't really have that issue like we do here. And it's just that's the southern part of Michigan, a lot of business own a lot of lands, farmers, things like that. So unless you kind of have somebody that you know that you can get in, it's very difficult nowadays just to knock on somebody's door and say, hey, can I come hunt there? I wish it was easier. But yeah, so Michigan does have a lot of overabundance of deer in the southern part. Now, the northern part, I mean, I think for me, like when I was in that group, one of my things I really focused on was it seems like there's still a lot of like areas that are, you can talk to one group of guys and they've hardly seen any deer. And yet the next group, I mean, maybe 10 miles away, they're saying, man, we're seeing 100 deer out in the fields every night. So it's hard to manage that, where you're, I mean, how small do you want to break up like little districts for the DNR to manage and things? So I think for me, I've always just told people this is my thoughts. You know your land more than anybody. Your neighbors do. Talk to your neighbors. See what you guys are seeing, what needs to be done. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing. And in turn, you're getting friends with your neighbors. I've been blessed. We have great neighbors where we hunt. We hunt in North or the Lapeer County of Michigan, Thumb area, and we just have great neighbors. I just yesterday, funny story, he sent me a message over my neighbor, and he's like, "Hey, dude, is anybody out in the back of your property?" I'm like, "Shouldn't be." So a little while later, he goes, "Don't worry." He goes, "Somebody had let the cows out from the neighboring butcher. They're rounding up the cows in the area." But it's nice to get a message from your neighbor watching your property too, and we have access through there.
Yeah.
So now, different parts of Michigan, like the northern parts, there are some good areas with a lot of deer in those areas. But once again, we have separating areas in Michigan where we have parts of the APRs on the west side of the upper lower peninsula, and then the other side, the eastern part, we have a lot of issues with the CWD out there. So they've been giving out extra tags and trying to get people to shoot more antlerless deer, and the whole lower peninsula of Michigan is still under the baiting ban. So and that's still a discussion between hunters.
You're
also
giving me lots of talking points here, but those I want to get to. One thing I do want to mention is if you just heard Dale talk there, I think this applies everywhere, most everywhere, except the magical places that you see on TV, like Iowa and Kansas and parts of Missouri and some parts of other places. But I wrote a couple numbers down here. Michigan. For many, many years, excuse me, I've taken a sip of water here. For many years, it was Michigan and Pennsylvania as far as hunter numbers go. Wisconsin was always there for deer harvest and deer population. But I break it down by land mass now because everybody was jumping on me when I said deer populations. And I'm like, well, I'll do it by square mile. Okay, let's do that. So, but what I do is not the deer numbers. Let's talk about the human population numbers. So if I'm just talking lower Michigan, because the UP is a whole nother world. Lower Michigan, 40,000 square miles of land, 10 million people. Wisconsin, 54,000 square miles of land, 5 million people. So we have half the population as Michigan and 30% more land. And what you're talking about is when you're saying lower Michigan, like with southern lower, it's the same everywhere. You're talking about like, oh, we have all these deer numbers, but you're talking about a 10 or 20 acre property is a big property. You know, like if you can get access, yeah, that would be great. But it simply can't be done. And I don't know what the answer is there. That was one point. The other point is with that, and I should do a little research before this podcast for that. People say, well, the hunter numbers are going down. Have you guys even looked at what land prices are now? It's astronomical.
It's ridiculous.
If you want 40 acres of land, it's $300,000 starting. It's like what average guy that's working in the mill or that's working, in an auto shop or something that is making a decent wage, but who can afford that? So that's part of the problem, and I don't envy the state deer manager's position because I know you guys give out doe tags until your ears bleed and it doesn't matter because it's like if you have the deer, like you said, if you have the deer on your property, you're going to shoot them and you're going to shoot enough to feed maybe you and your family, but you're not going to go above and beyond that. You're not going to go on a killing spree just to go on a killing spree. So, I mean, where does the answers lie? I personally don't know. But I know that you're dealing with it. We're dealing with it here. People in Pennsylvania are dealing with it. People in Tennessee are dealing with it. And then you throw these other things in like EHD. Chronic wasting disease, it's popping up, but I don't see the problem that we're having, you're having with EHD, especially this year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree. I mean, we were even thinking, talking with my friends a while back, where I mean, like when you look back years ago, late 70s, 80s, like when I started hunting. Really, everybody talked about you could talk to any old timer like that, where it would be they hunted state land. most people now in a lot of states, I mean, it's private land you're hunting. And just like you said, I mean, prices, I mean, I think right now we get some parcels around by us in the mid-Michigan area. It was like $8,000-9,000 an acre. And I was just thinking, I mean, how does the average Joe or even how does a rich guy even
Right.
afford? I mean, that's a lot of money.
How do you
for,
justify it for deer hunting?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, you can go elk
So,
hunting. You can go out west. I could go elk hunting, antelope hunting, and mule deer hunting out west for what people are paying for 40 acres of
Right.
dealing with the neighbors on hunting on property line and stuff like that. So it's something that we're not going to solve, but it sure is frustrating.
But it was easier, I think, to manage for state officials when it was more people hunting state land, where, I mean, you knew X amount of people were going to converge on those areas. And it was dangerous at times, don't get me wrong. There was probably too many people hunting on those state lands, and now they've just kind of spread out more into these smaller.
Well, how does
parcels
APRs
there.
fall into that, though? Because it was hard for them to manage then, but now when you're putting antler restrictions and people saying, you know, you're trying to manage for age on small properties, which is a topic for a whole nother podcast. But now it becomes so competitive that people don't want to kill does. They've paid all this money for land,
Right.
and now you're telling me I got to hold out for an 8-pointer or better. Doesn't that kind of exasperate the situation and make it worse?
Well, I think that's when I was in that deer management initiative through Michigan. That was one of the main talks. What can we do to help that? I mean, do we need to go to one buck tag? Do we need to shoot a doe, earn a buck? I mean, There was a lot of discussions in that, and I know when the discussion came out with the decision from the NRC, I know people weren't happy because they see that problem that we really need to be shooting more does, and yet, how do you do that without changing your tag structure? And there was a back and forth discussion, and then we had kind of had one position, and yet the NRC just kind of went with what they felt was going to be right for the state. And I know there wasn't a lot of happy hunters in Michigan. So yeah, it's very difficult because I agree. You're dealing with a lot of different types of hunters. I don't know if it's every state like that, but Michigan, believe me, there's a lot of. I mean, you still have a lot of old timers that really don't even refuse to shoot a doe. I mean, they're still back in the days where Michigan. I mean, I was in that era where, I mean, you wanted a doe, you applied for a special tag, and it was a big deal. You got a letter in the mail saying, hey, you got a doe tag, and I mean, that was a big thing. And there's a lot of people that are still refuse to shoot does. So yeah, it's hard to manage a state like that. So I understand where these people in DNR are dealing with. It's not an easy job.
So you have your thumb on the pulse for these guys. You have 100,000 fans just about on your page. What is the what do you see as the overall, I want to stay on the antler point restrictions topic. What's the overall mood for people who live in that area who hunt? Do they like it? Do they not like it? Or is it split down the middle?
You know, I would say it's pretty. I'd say it leans a little more towards APR, but I would say it's pretty close to split in the middle also. I've had people tell me I'm actually one of the exceptions, I think, on one of the pages where I'm still an old school type guy. I personally, on my own property, I practice APR. I feel it should be really the landowner's decision, because I kind of seen both spectrums of hunting. I mean, I grew up where really, I mean, you didn't see a lot of big bucks back in those days, and but you really weren't out for antlers back then. It was really just, man, you shot deer, but I mean, it was really more about the deer camp, and it shifted more into the type of deer that you're hunting now. So yeah, I think a lot of people probably my age or older are still probably in that type of mode where they don't feel like they don't want the DNR to tell them what they can or can't shoot. But I mean, I myself, I mean, like when people send me photos in throughout really the whole state of Michigan, even the UP, I mean, you can see there's benefits now over the last probably decade where, just as you said, people are holding off more. They're passing on the spikes, they're passing on the 4-pointers, where you can see some pretty nice bucks coming out of Michigan right now in the last few years. And that's in areas that don't have antler point restrictions. So even some areas of the UP right now are getting some really nice bucks that coming through there compared to if you look at what a buck pull would look like 25 years ago in Michigan. So, yeah, it's still a hot topic. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. It really is. I mean, a lot of people like my page because I'm kind of open on that topic. I'm okay really with either. My whole focus of my page has really been enjoy hunting, enjoy the experience, enjoy just being with your family and friends. Because believe me, I wake up every morning when I go hunting. I'd like to get a big buck. I mean, don't get me wrong, but man, there's a lot that goes into that day of hunting and being with your friends. And just last couple of years, going up with my friends there, we were out there opening weekend of archery season, and there's a lot of times where I'd really just prefer just to hang around the deer camp and just hang around with the old timers and talk deer stories.
Did you have
That's
a guy?
how much I miss.
Like we did. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you have a guy? Because you're bringing back all these deer camp memories for me. My uncle, Clarence, he's actually the one who got my brothers Tony, Kenny, Roger, and I really excited about deer hunting with my dad, and he was the camp cook. But so
we had a camp cook.
He got to the point where he didn't really care if you went hunting or not. And I remember being there, and like he'd have chickens roasting and a ham going and a huge, slow cooker full of baked beans, and you come in there and you think it'd be like, he's cooking for 50 people. Did you have a guy like that at camp?
Yeah, that was Bill Ash. He was always our camp cook, but I mean, he
Everybody had
hunted,
one.
and yeah, he hunted, but I mean, he's still he's passed the reins over to his son David now. That's why David was the cook when we were up there a couple weeks ago, and yeah, I think there was like a structure of everybody had their own personality in deer camp. We even had some traditions and things like that too, where I was lucky to. I haven't uploaded some of those yet, but I still have a few. Like morning, like we were getting up at like 4 a.m. going elk hunting that morning. We were all sitting around the table up in Lewiston, Michigan, like the upper lower peninsula, and everybody's just groggy. And Bill, he's at the frying, he's got the frying pan, the eggs, and everything going. But that was just a really cool memory. I wish I had more of those. I just haven't uploaded some of those yet. I found those tapes a while back at my mom's house, but yeah, there was just and I think what you had touched on previous also, as far as like. Not really becoming a man type thing, but really joining the groups of the hunters. It was like that, but still, we never felt like we were kids either. They took us under their wings as almost like a second father. And that's what was really nice about it, because, I mean, Al especially, I mean, I talked to him 2 weeks ago, and I thanked him really for a lot of the stuff. I mean, because really things that I have that I've learned you don't get nowadays a lot of people. So I mean, if you just learn, if you just want to go hunting, what do? I mean, you go to a store, have somebody pick you a bow out who's up behind the counter, and even just basic things. So I think a lot of times on my page, I try to focus on basic things that maybe a lot of hunters would be like, everyone knows that, but no, they don't. I just last night had a new hunter. He was actually from Ohio, and I do get quite a few people from across the state, and I have a couple from Canada and Quebec and all that. But he had just asked what I call a simple question. He goes, "I'm a new hunter. He goes, I'd like to manage deer a little nicer and basically not shoot anything small." He goes, "How do you judge a deer that's far off? Is it a mature deer or is it a smaller deer?" I mean, to an experienced hunter, you just kind of have learned that, but to a new hunter, I mean, you don't see that, and a lot of magazines, podcasts, and things like that, TV shows, you don't really see that basic information. Where we learn that information from our grandfathers, from our dads, from our moms, things like that. So that's missed a lot.
And it's expected, like, I'm glad you bring it up, because we still, as you know, we will regurgitate some of that stuff every year because Glenn Helgeland actually taught me this. He had the Deer and Turkey Expos. He had one in Michigan. He had one in Wisconsin and Illinois and Ohio. He said the people that would come to that Deer and Turkey Expo, a third of them were brand new people every year. and you would think like, oh, it's the same guys every single. It's not, and it's the same. We find that with the magazine, we find that with the TV show, we find that especially online because it does skew to a younger demographic. It's the simple things where it's like I take it for granted, you take it for granted, but and even as we grew up and we didn't have this kind of media, you had uncle or dad or whoever, friends, kind of reminding you of that stuff. Maybe not so much telling you, but showing you, like how to field dress a deer. Well, how many times did I field dress a deer? I don't even think I've done it yet, where I've got it perfect, And it's like you show that, but people say, "Well, who doesn't know that?" Well, there's a lot of people who don't know that, and I think that's the other part of the camaraderie part that comes into it. And I've completely lost my train of thought. Oh, I was going to ask you about, you were talking about bow hunting. Where is it in Michigan now? Do you have a feel for where is the split between guys using crossbows and guys using regular bows? Is there an issue there, or is it just kind of accepted now?
I would say it's more accepted than it ever used to be. Don't really get the arguments or anything. I mean, here or there you get somebody to throw something in there, but really has changed quite a bit over the years. I think a lot of people I've seen that have gone back to compounds or even traditional. I've seen more and more people doing that. Yeah. So I have seen that happening. Like every once in a while, I'll get a picture of someone with their deer, and they're like, "Hey, I'm gonna next year go back to a compound." So that's kind of cool that they're trying to change up their hunting, trying to get some new experiences and things like that. And because we started out with pretty much either compound or recur. That was kind of our options. We didn't have crossbows back then, but yeah, I know when that came out, that was a big thing, and it still is for a lot of people. But the way I look at the crossbow issue is we need deer harvested, yep. And if it brings more people in, and I know I've watched plenty of your episodes online, it doesn't matter. As long as you're ethically and legally shooting your deer, we're losing. We're losing some demographics with hunters anyways, and I feel the crossbow really does attract a lot of the younger kids. I think do like the crossbow, because I know I was just talking to my friend Dave when we had our youth hunt last month, and he said he had a couple firearms for them ready, and he goes, the one ended up just taking the crossbow. He likes using the crossbow, and so I think that's a good option for kids, and
it's helped retain those older hunter too. My dad never bow hunted in his life, and then he got a crossbow because of a disability when he turned 65, and he shot his last deer the year before last, before he passed, when he was 87. So he hunted with a crossbow for 22 years and loved it. Okay. I just saw that you were at the dedication for the Fred Bear event. Tell us a little bit about that.
That was a great event. I was invited. I got friends with Ted Nugent, and they're a group of insider friends. Great people. Talked to Ted quite a few times on the phone, and just really enjoyed that experience. So I was asked if I would just kind of do some behind-the-scenes video, and I think I was one of the few or if maybe the only one that did the whole event live. From the time behind the scenes all the way up through the whole event, and such a great man that Fred Bear meant to, the whole archery community in the world, basically. But, Michigan, he had a lot of history up in northern parts of Michigan. And I think when I started archery hunting, kind of was getting at that age where I didn't know as much about him. Our first bows were, it seemed like everybody back then had a bear bow. Or used bear razor heads or whatever. Yeah. Yeah, that was like the only bow out there pretty much, and everybody used it. They had a great crowd. I think even more than I think people really had expected. Just a lot of speakers came in. They had the statue events. They had taken donations for a couple years, and they just, the statue came out beautiful. If you haven't seen it, there's some either on my page or some other outlets online, but they did a really nice job with that to a great man that's meant a lot to the archery across the whole world.
Where was this again? I can't remember. Which city?
This was in Grayling, Michigan.
Grayling, yes.
That's where his company was started out at.
Right.
So I had kind of talked to Tom Nelson a little bit about his history with him, and he had worked at the time at Anderson Archery. Anderson Archery was real big in Michigan, so that's how he got to know Fred Bear. So I got some stories through him where he would drive up to Grayling, dropping off some bows, and it was pretty cool. I got a chance to really get a lot of behind the scenes I didn't know about him. And it seems like everybody I've talked to, whether it's Ted Nugent, I had a chance to talk to M.R. James a while back, everybody has a great Fred Bear story. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what was great about the man. And even though I personally never knew him, I kind of seen him a while back. Michigan, I don't know if you remember, years ago, like in the 80s, we had Michigan Outdoors with Fred Trost.
Yep.
He had him on there quite a bit. And that's where I kind of started to get to know who he was. But everything that I've heard from everybody was that he was just, even though he had this status of Fred Bear, but he just had an average Joe hunter too. I mean, you could walk up to him, talk to him, say hi, you could have a drink with him, whatever. And that's the type of guy he was. He wasn't some big celebrity status guy that, oh, you're not in my group, I'm not going to talk to you. He was there. He truly enjoyed archery and just truly enjoyed passing his knowledge on to people. And everybody that's known him or hunted with him that I've talked to have just really have a deep passion and love for the man. And so I think it's great what Michigan did up in Grayling, getting a statue for him. They had programs where I know they have some bricks around. People could kind of donate to the fund and everything, but just had a lot of people throughout the state. I mean, they had people come in from other states for that event. And
I would have been there had I not been. We were out in Wyoming. Otherwise, I would have been there.
Yeah.
It was
just a great day, and weather was beautiful. I was glad I actually did that. I had a lot of people if you're interested, there's still a page on Facebook. It's a FredBearDay.org, I believe it's called. There's a page dedicated to all that.
We'll put links up there.
Yeah.
I gotta apologize to everybody from the beginning listening. Fred Trost needs to be included in that list because he had a great program. I mean, even if you didn't live in Michigan, you've seen his videos. He had a great program. Okay, one more topic for you, Dale, and this I'm really going to put you on the spot because we're going to hold you to a couple minutes on this. The baiting situation in Michigan, where is it now, and how do the hunters feel about it?
All right, well, the baiting in Michigan has some different areas where you can hunt. So first of all, we'll get right to the UP. The UP, you can hunt. You can bait in the UP. I had asked the question on why we're okay with the baiting in the UP and yet not in the lower peninsula. DNR gave me the answer that they've done studies in the UP, that there's been no cases of CWD. This is what I've been hearing.
I know, I'm just listening.
Nothing over the years.
I'll try to refrain.
Right.
Yep.
So this was their whole discussion on why it's still up there. I'm going to give you my personal thoughts on that. Is when I hear both sides of the story from the DNR, as far as why we are baiting restriction in the southern part in the lower peninsula compared to the upper, my whole thoughts would be if the baiting for sure is, if the studies are showing that it's working, okay, then I think that would be probably logical then to do it in the UP to prevent it, but it's not. So I kind of pushed on that. I know some other people pushed on that topic as far as why there's certain areas that you can and you can't. And this all goes back to their studies with, I don't know how big a square or something they would do with browse on the ground and all this. And so as far as how does people feel about it, I'd say it's pretty mixed. I think a lot of people by now see, a few years ago we had a baiting restriction and then they opened it back up again and then they restricted again. So we're in now the lower part of Michigan, the whole lower peninsula. There's no baiting allowed. This goes for like recreational feeding and everything, even though people are still doing it.
That's what. Okay, let me just pause you there. Okay, so in the lower peninsula, there's no baiting allowed. You go to the nearest. I don't know. Do you have quick trips there, or you go to the nearest gas?
No, just gas stations.
You go to the gas station. Are there or are there not piles of corn and bait at those gas stations?
Yeah, there's piles there. If you get a little bit northern parts of the state or northern parts of the lower peninsula, I mean, you can basically get a truckload if you want to.
So everybody's baiting.
Scoop there,
pretty much. People who want to bait are going to bait.
Pretty much. I mean, my thoughts are they wouldn't be selling it. That's any commodity. If you're not selling it, you're not
Right.
you're not going to sell it. So
And
apparently it must be something.
that's not. I see both sides of this too. However, I agree with you. And this is, I got this from Ted himself. There's not a certain biology in the UP and another a deer biology in the UP and then another deer biology in the lower P, or another deer biology in Alabama or Wisconsin or anywhere, Texas. To me, it is a very poor Band-Aid for a problem that probably can't be solved. And the other thing, too, is when we talk about, when you say transmission, disease transmission, there is no study showing that this is being transmitted more. And a guy who plants 5 acres of turnips, there's going to be more nose-to-nose contact on a turnip, if you know anything about deer biology, than a bag of corn that has been sitting there for 3 days and now it's gone. But that's my personal opinion. I'm assuming
Their stats. They told us their stats. They told us their stats disagreed with that because that was one of the topics that came up. Why is there more those? But
really,
is what is.
And John Ozoga, I know you probably know John. John agrees, and that's where I get most of my opinions from. I consider, I mean, you talk about Michigan legends, John's got to be in the top one as far as just information. But so basically, what you're probably telling us is that the situation is the same there as it is anywhere that's dealing with that problem.
Yeah. I'm good friends with a CO officer, and he said, one of their top things they're giving tickets out for is still baiting. I don't know if you had heard a while back. They had, and I'd never heard anything since. They did have a trial in that southeast corner of Lower Peninsula where they were putting, out some sort of stuff that was supposed to block TB or something in the food or something. I'd never heard anything since from that.
So what is the tuberculosis situation? I know that Michigan has dealt with that. Bovine tuberculosis, and they were worried about deer transmitting that to cattle?
Yeah, and that's what they were doing. They were adding some sort of tablet I had read in some farm journal, and the DNR came out and said that they were putting it in some feed or something where that the deer could actually, it was ingestible, I guess. So, but I've never heard anything since from that. That was maybe back in June, July. I'd heard some notice about that they were trying something that was supposed to prevent or get rid of TB. I don't know. Never heard the results of that. But yeah, right now their main thing that they're doing is really just trying to give out more doe tags, trying to reduce the deer numbers in those high density areas to prevent their nose-to-nose contact, is what they say. So as far as baiting, yeah, I mean it's still kind of a hot topic. A lot of people I know would still like to do it, but there's some that are strictly against it too.
Yeah.
But I think that probably depends on where you're hunting. I mean, if you're hunting in a lower part where there's tons and tons of food, probably not a lot of
and if you own land, I mean that's where the situation here is. If you own land, you don't want people baiting because it's going to turn deer mostly nocturnal. If there's guys hunting over it, and if you're hunting a public land, which I grew up hunting in northern Wisconsin, Chequamegon National Forest, you're going to sit many, many, many days and hours without seeing a deer, and we never did bait. We thought it was illegal. We were so stupid. We thought it was illegal. And here the guys are in the camps next to us have sagging meat poles with the biggest cow does you could imagine. I'm like, how are these guys killing all these deer? Well, here we found out they were baiting them all those years. But I see both sides of it. I do disagree with a lot of the way they manage it, because it's like if it's getting more people out there, if it's limited, if it's a limited situation, if it's a 10-gallon rule, they'd say, well, we don't want our wardens. Well, that's what we pay the wardens for. If a guy's going out there dumping a gravity box, okay, different story.
We used to always have a 5-gallon bucket limit. That's what it used to be, where you would spread that out.
Yep.
And that was always the thing. So you could pretty much put whatever you want out.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we've got to have you back on, Dale, because we've run out of time, and we've got probably at least 24 more topics we could go over. Again, people want to find.
Let me know.
People want to find you. Where can they go?
Just go basically to right to Facebook, Michigan Deer Hunters.
The logo's right
You
there
see the
behind him,
big
that nice logo, and it's
logo's
on the
right
shirt
behind
too.
me.
Yep. Michigan Deer
Thank
Hunters.
you,
Great
Scott.
page. Great page, and you
Thank
don't have
you
to
very
live in
much. I
Michigan.
appreciate it.
Yeah, you
No,
don't have to be a
no,
Michigan
you're
Deer
all
Hunter.
over. I mean, I always tell people, if you're anywhere in this country, even Canada or whatever, give us a like, give us a follow, and glad to have you join us. We're all deer hunters.
You'll like the page. He's Dale Techel. I am Dan Schmidt. Thank you for joining us once again for Deer Talk Now. All we ask you to do is like and subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening to it or watching it. And if you're watching it, it's probably on YouTube. And if you want to find us on YouTube and you haven't found it, it's YouTube.com/DDH online. We'll catch you next Thursday for another brand new episode of Deer Talk Now.